The last rays of sun dipped below the horizon, casting an eerie glow on the faces of 4 teenagers huddled around a flickering street lamp. There was Max, the self-proclaimed leader, Fiona, the voice of reason, often ignored, Jake, the class clown, and Emily, the skeptic. "Okay, who chickens out first?" Max challenged, gesturing towards the dilapidated Victorian mansion looming at the end of the street. "We all know it's going to be Emily," Jake quipped, earning himself a threatening glare. "I'm not scared," Emily retorted, "just because you guys believe in childish ghost stories." "It's not childish, it's a legend," Max interjected. "They say the house is haunted by the ghost of old Mrs. Pickles, who died tragically while spreading Vegemite on her toast." Fiona shivered. "Okay, that's a little creepy, even for me." The old iron gate creaked open with a groan, announcing their arrival like a fanfare of doom. Cobwebs clung to their faces as they cautiously entered the house, each creaking step amplifying the silence. Dust caked every surface, and the musty air hung heavy with the weight of forgotten memories. "See? Nothing here," Emily whispered, her voice echoing through the empty hall. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the silence. Jake jumped a mile, his shriek almost as high-pitched as the one that startled them. "Gotcha!" Max cackled, holding up a whoopee cushion. Jake's face turned a delightful shade of crimson. "Not funny, dude. Shh, did you hear that?" Fiona interrupted, her eyes wide with fear. A faint scratching sound was coming from upstairs. Max, his bravado faltering slightly, grabbed a dusty old broom. "Let's go check it out." Upstairs, the hallway stretched before them, lined with portraits of stern-looking individuals who seemed to follow their every move. The scratching sound grew louder, emanating from a room at the end of the hall. With a deep breath, Max threw open the door, prepared to face whatever lurked within. The room was bare except for a single table upon which sat a jar of Vegemite, seemingly glowing faintly in the dim light. "What the?" Max stammered, his tough guy facade crumbling. Just then the jar lid flew off, seemingly of its own accord, and a glob of Vegemite levitated into the air, twisting and turning as if possessed. "Okay, that's just creepy," Emily admitted, her skepticism finally wavering. "Jake, pale and trembling, could only manage a week. I told you so." The next few hours were a blur of unexplained occurrences and escalating terror. Pictures flew off the walls, furniture moved with a life of its own, and the faint aroma of toasted bread lingered in the air, despite the lack of any visible kitchen appliances. "This is too much, even for a prank!" Fiona exclaimed, clutching a terrified-looking Jake. Max, though visibly shaken, tried to maintain his composure. "There has to be a logical explanation," he insisted, even as a disembodied laugh echoed through the hallway. They decided to set a trap, rigging the hallway with tripwires made from yarn and strategically placed buckets of water. If this was a prank, they were determined to catch the culprit red-handed. Section 5. The Mystery of the Moving Toast. Their elaborate plan backfired spectacularly. Instead of catching a prankster, they found themselves dodging flying toast, the air thick with the smell of burnt bread. A loaf of bread, seemingly suspended in midair, was being systematically sliced and toasted, the finished product launching itself at them with surprising accuracy. "Who knew toast could be so terrifying?" Emily shrieked, narrowly avoiding a projectile piece of rye. Max, covered in crumbs and dripping with water from a fallen bucket, was starting to lose his nerve. This was no ordinary prank. "We need to get out of here," he yelled, abandoning all pretense of bravery. Section 6. Captured on camera. Desperate for answers, Fiona suggested they review the footage from their phones, hoping to catch a glimpse of the culprit or at least capture evidence of the paranormal activity. What they found was more bizarre than anything they could have imagined. The videos showed objects moving on their own, just as they had witnessed, but with one disturbing detail. Hovering near each object was a faint, shimmering outline of a figure, resembling a jar of Vegemite with arms and legs. "The Vegemite ghost is real!" Jake exclaimed, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and morbid fascination. Even Emily, the eternal skeptic, had to admit that this was beyond any logical explanation. They were trapped in a real-life ghost story, and the punchline was nowhere in sight. Section 7. Confronting the Vegemite Ghost. Their attempts to reason with the Vegemite ghost proved futile. It seemed to delight in their terror, responding to their pleas with mischievous giggles and a barrage of toast. Maybe it just wants more Vegemite, Fiona offered, an idea forming in her mind. They gathered around the jar of Vegemite, now sitting ominously in the middle of the living room. "Okay, Ghost," Max began cautiously. "We come in peace. Just tell us what you want." The room remained eerily silent. Section 8. The Twist. Suddenly the jar of Vegemite began to shake violently. A high-pitched voice, muffled by the glass, filled the room. "Can't breathe. Too much. Vegemite." The teenagers exchanged bewildered glances. This ghostly voice sounded suspiciously familiar. With a grunt, Max grabbed the jar and started to unscrew the lid. As the lid popped off, a wave of relief mixed with a healthy dose of annoyance washed over them. Trapped inside the jar, covered in Vegemite, was none other than Mr. Snuggles, Fiona's pet hamster, who had been missing for weeks. Section 9. A spread of laughter. The relief in the room was palpable. Laughter replaced screams as the reality of the situation sunk in. Mr. Snuggles, freed from his sticky prison, scurried up Fiona's arm, seemingly no worse for wear after his Vegemite-fueled adventure. "Well, that explains the toast," Emily remarked dryly. Max, his ego slightly bruised, but his sense of humour intact, grinned at his friends. So much for the legend of Mrs. Pickles and her haunted Vegemite. I guess some mysteries are best left unsolved, or at least explained by a very hungry hamster. The scene opens with a close-up of a mysterious old Vegemite jar sitting on a dusty shelf. The jar looks ancient, its label faded and peeling, hinting at countless untold stories. The camera slowly zooms in as eerie music plays in the background. The atmosphere grows tense, and the shadows around the jar seem to dance with a life of their own. Suddenly the jar starts to shake violently, and the screen cuts to black with a loud crash sound. The silence that follows is almost deafening, leaving viewers on the edge of their seats. The text, "What happens next?" appears on the screen, but the story doesn't end here. In the dim light of a flickering candle, a shadowy figure emerges in the background. The air grows colder, and a sense of dread fills the room. A hand, pale and ghostly, reaches out from the darkness, moving slowly towards the jar. The tension is palpable, and the air is thick with suspense. The lid of the jar begins to turn ever so slowly, as if resisting the force trying to open it. The creaking sound echoes through the silence, sending chills down the spine. Suddenly, a burst of light emanates from the jar, filling the room with an eerie glow. The figure recoils and the screen fades to black once more. The text, "To be continued," appears on the screen, leaving the mystery of the haunted Vegemite jar unresolved for now.